I'm Fred Stielow from the American Public University System, and all I'm going to do is sit up here and turn the podium over to Dan Benjamin, who's the dean, also in the U.S. of our School of Science and Technology, and Danny Welsch, who's the program director in science. So this is a session for technology, innovation, education, and policy, pretty much from the perspective of a fully online university. Daniel.
Thank you, Fred.
Part of the way.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you.
So we can invite
We need to semi-invite.
You probably have to really speak up in order to.
But there's a lot of stuff to talk about here, and there's small groups, so we'll just keep it informal. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions. And just to give you an idea, I'm going to kind of breeze through some of the slides quickly. I have about 44 slides, and I've got 15 minutes to get So that's about 3 slides a minute, but I'll try to talk as fast as I can. Here's a classic question in higher education and online education. I mean, this is true whether you're online or not. 65% of our school children today are going to be ending up in a job that we know nothing about. So it's kind of interesting. So really what we're doing is it's like taking somebody and blindfolding them and spinning them around, having to throw a dart at a dartboard, right? And it's sad to say, so in all of education today really is a guessing game when you talk about careers and jobs. And this is the challenge, and sadly so, another quick comment here, we already are lagging many, let's say, in higher education, there are a lot of schools that are lagging behind already in terms of today's world. And if the world is changing tomorrow, you can just imagine they're going to be left further behind. Take gen eds, for example. A lot of them have not upgraded the gen eds. A lot of them are using, in fact, in some high schools, even as recent as this past year, they would not allow students to bring their iPhones and Droids and all that into the classroom. You had to put them in your locker. If you bring it to the classroom, you could get punished for it. And yet, that is what they live on. I mean, they live and thrive on their iPhones and the Droids and so on. And it's like telling somebody, by the I don't know too many Indian languages. I'd massacre any one of the Indian languages, but we have about 200 of them. But let's pretend I knew an Indian language, and that was the way I taught. And all of a sudden you say, Dan, you cannot talk, you cannot think in terms of your language, now you have to talk, think about some other language. That's like shutting me down totally. One of the big problems here is that's caused most of the havoc in whether it be education or anything else is consumerization of devices, consumerization and commoditization in general. First thing, devices. You can have a little iPhone, you either got it for free or you, probably $199, right, with your subscription, and depending on which phone you got, with a Droid side and so on. And now all of a sudden it becomes an access device to a network and to learning, online learning. Okay, so it's commoditized. Networks themselves, I mean, but I didn't get this gentleman. What's your name, by the way?
Michael.
Michael. I got to thank Michael. He just reset the router for me. That router probably cost about almost 30, 40 bucks, right? Many years ago, that cost about a couple $1,000. Okay, 2 years ago, and today that's just about $30, and you can just plug it in, and it kind of works pretty much. And in those days, you had to do you need a heavy install and a lot of technical folks and so on. Storage today, you hear about iCloud and Amazon's cloud and all the other clouds and so on. Storage is very cheap. It's pennies for a gig. Okay, in the good old days, actually, without telling you how old I am, I remember we bought a 10 megabyte hard drive many years ago, and that cost like about $10,000 or something. I know some of you, can relate with smile, and some of the younger folks are saying, "What are you talking about?" Right? Yeah, it's amazing. There are folks who don't even know what a cassette tape is, right? Right, and of course, the biggest disruptor today is the commoditization of education. We'll talk about that as we go further down. Okay, so it's no longer going to be the way we've been looking at it. And actually, I must put in a plug for Dr. Frank and Dr. Fred Stielow. They're going to have another presentation on Frank?
Yeah, on the digital universities label.
Okay. So I would say check that out too. So you're going to find a lot of good things there in terms of the education side. So here are some of the trends in technology. We already know about mobile, right? But just keep in mind, everybody talks mobile, we got to go this way. About 4 years ago when I came in and talked about the BYOD concept, right? Some people said, Dan, you're serious, you're not kidding, right? 4 years ago. And today it's like, man, it's don't even talk about it, then everybody knows about it. That term.
Augmented reality, come on, stop.
Right. But coming back to mobile, mobile's only a stop on the journey. It's not where we're going to go finally. It's a temporary stop. That's our next stop. And after that, you'll be getting into glassware. You know, you just put your glasses on and you walk around, you do everything you got to do, and so on. And then, of course, in terms of the human-computer interface and so on, we're going to get into audio, a lot more audio interaction. You already have some of it, but it's not in a big way. And gesture-based control, and if we get internet, I'll show you connectivity again, we'll show that to you. And then, of course, the big thing we all are waiting for is the brain-to-computer interface, the BCI, okay, where you can just think about things and make it happen. And by the way, there's already a lot of studies done where a person can control a wheelchair just by deciding which way they want to go left and so on. But they have to focus a little bit. For some folks, I'm playfully saying Dr. Stielow, he's all over the place, so it's going to be hard for him to get to one direction. He moves too fast. Okay, here, and of course, augmented reality was one point in the other one where you can take your gestures in one world and you can actually, virtual reality is kind of passive, but here you can be engaged in another world of reality just by gestures in one world. And I'll let Dr. Frank will be talking more about analytics probably later on. But the internet is just going to be an internet of stuff. There are things you want, you can just get it off the net. And then you're going to find a lot of aggregators on the net. So you'll find those two things are going to become popular. But then there's the great, from a technology standpoint, everybody's waiting for the great digital singularity when, it's like the time warp thing when you cross that thing where something happens, where computers can actually, they already designed the layout of other computers, but where they can really design the whole computer. So in other words, right now we are limited by how smart we are or not, right? There, the computer can kind of keep on improving itself, so it can become superhuman and super intelligent. In terms of learning, gaming and simulation is the way to go, and we'll talk about a few things coming up. We got augmented reality coming up too. So quick things here. Students are ready for technology much more than some of the older folks are. But interestingly, even at this point in time, probably we can take a quick thing over here. If you look around, we have about four laptops and maybe about 2 iPads, right? So it's not in the same ratio, but I was surprised that the percentage of laptops is still that high.
No, we have 4 iPads.
4? Okay. Okay, so definitely this room is not the representative. But here are some of the things people want to do from a mobile phone. They want to, interesting, they can access the courses, check the grades, check the homework, do all kinds of things. But one thing that is not there is actually doing their course work. Because you have to write papers, that's a common way of doing things in today's world. So for that, they need some other device, at least of now. But some people still write papers even on the iPhone and so on, but not for the average person. So learning might have to change to adapt to technology, because technology is going to drive that change. Let's see. Interestingly, on the right side, you see 57% of students wish the instructors would use it more. So it's kind of reversed. In the good old days, the instructors wish the students would do more. Now it's going to reverse. And then you look at the first one on the right. They tend to choose courses with technology as opposed to courses without technology. It's not, even that is reversed. That's a reverse trend. This will just kind of fly by in a quick seconds. This in 1 minute on the internet, there are over 2 million search queries over here. With Google, you can see there are over 100,000 tweets and so on. And actually, you can see there are 20 new victims of identity theft, and that's a big concern from a technology standpoint, every minute. And 60,000 plus hours of music on Pandora's radio and so on. And that's because we have a big boom in terms of population usage of the net. And actually, in terms of the volume of information going across, today we're probably in the gigabyte and terabyte world. If you want a backup device, you can get some terabytes and so on. But pretty soon we're going to be in the zettabyte world, which is 10 to the power 21, and you can put all of the Library of Congress material and more within one of those petabytes. Sorry, zettabytes. And petabyte is the one that's probably going to come out, sometime by the end of, say, by the end of next year and so on. And actually, last year we talked about storage, because storage is a big. Now that we have a lot of content, we have a lot of. And we were talking at the table too. Even publishers are being disrupted, and so they're becoming content aggregators. Okay. Let me move quickly. Here's some of there's a lot of tweets. You can see tweets are increasing every day. In terms of education, you can see there's going to be virtual teachers, and that's one of the big challenges today, that we don't, or let's say one of the concerns for faculty members, and I get asked that quite a bit. What will happen when we get into adaptive learning, when we get into a lot more technology and so on? Will I still have a job? What is my role? Going to become, when the computer does a lot of the teaching, especially once you get into adaptive learning and so on, where it can do all the remediation for you. Okay.
When you went over that quickly. Wasn't glad you went over that quickly.
Right. Now, video is very important, and we want to focus on that. Let me move on. And video has a lot more. It's one of the things they expect in education today is something that engages them and so on. So video is a good tool. We'll just move on and let's see. Games. Games is another big thing. And games actually is good. And actually, you'll like the next slide. It's all about the dope. Okay. So with dopamine, that's the factor that helps you with learning. That's what gets triggered. So that's a key factor. And besides that, there's a lot of critical thinking that takes place. You learn about teamwork and a lot of other factors. So video. And by the way, here's the thing. Even the Department of Defense hired a lot of gamers when they want to control the drones that are flying over Pakistan. Okay. They didn't want a guy like me who doesn't do too much of that, because the hand-eye coordination will be a little too wanting. Okay, and they can do a lot of problem solving, especially whether you've got War of the Worlds, depending which one you have. There's a lot of things you do that's applicable to real life. And here's some advantages of technology today. You have a lot more time outside the classroom, and that poses some policy concerns. Let's see. Then, in terms of computers, so far we're limited by the electrons, right? Our computers currently are based on electrons. So the next generation that they're working on is based on photons. Okay, so they're the optical computers, and of course you get into molecular computers, which is in Danny's area, in science. And we get into nanoelectronics. Now, really, the transistor now has millions of electrons flowing through. It's going to be a smaller channel. Let's move on. Move on from that. In terms of education, the expectation is people should be able to access it at any time, and of course accessibility, be already there. It should be much more active and engaging, much more collaborative. You can have a classroom where you have people from some other country involved with you at the same time. So the walls of the classroom have been blown out and so on. And now you also want personalized learning. If I'm struggling with a certain aspect, let's say I know how to do everything, I got a good grade in everything, except I don't know how to add. Okay? I shouldn't have to take the whole course all over again. You should just take me right to the spot and do some remediation. And all these things are done by automatically computers. There's a company called Newton, Knewton, one of the good companies who's doing a lot of work there with McGraw-Hill, right? Right. And now the other big disruptor is kids are asking, is the degree worth it anymore? And of course, by this chart, you do get paid more. But some of the options online, you have the open courseware, you hear about MOOCs a lot. And for all of us in the higher education industry, MOOCs is a big question, big concern. I'm sure you'll hear some more this afternoon about it. And we also are talking about regular online courses and regular online degrees. But the last one, let me go back, is the do-it-yourself degrees. And getting badges for parts of courses, for certificates and so on. So people are much more empowered to choose what they want. MOOCs are good. You can put hundreds of thousands of people into one course. It also has some concerns. And by the way, here's the one thing I was surprised with. They found people were plagiarizing even in MOOCs. And the question is why? When you don't have to submit things, why do you still copy? I mean, it's amazing. But one thing good about MOOCs is it's cheap, free in some cases. Of course, somebody's paying for it, some grant somewhere. Let me move on from IT headaches. The one that Stielow loves. And by the way, there's no time to show the...
No, you're out of time.
Okay, let me...
Dan's bigger, you go.
Okay. Now, I was saying 5 minutes for questions, but this is the final, we're coming to the final part. Here's what you remember in terms of security. Security is a big concern. Burglars know how to use Facebook and mine that for information much better than anyone else can. Okay, and there are all kinds of cases I can give that we, but we don't have time for that. So they know how to get to all these tools much more effectively.
Facebook, I use Facebook to log into my banking accounts and so on and so forth.
Right. Yeah, don't tell them you're going to be out in,
Can you get a badge for burglary?
Good question. But here are some of the policy-related questions. How do you assess learning anymore? We know how to assess a paper. How do you assess learning that took place on the net? You talk to somebody else in a chat room and you learn something new. How do we know you learned something? How do you document it? Then that raises another big question. So what is education? In the good old days, you sat in a classroom, listened to a professor, and you took notes and you passed an exam. That was education. So what is the concept of education? The definition itself is changing. How do you accredit these programs anymore? How do I accredit a person that collaborated with 10 people, learned something new, and says they learned something, and maybe they passed one simple exam or something? Then privacy security issues are a big factor once you get into technology education and so on. And then the concept of who owns the data. If they have data about me, for example, APUS, the university I work at, they have data about me. Does APUS own that data about me, or do I own it? If it's about me, shouldn't I have some ownership in that, and so on? So there are a lot of questions going on. And of course, Dr. Stielow's favorite thing is about citations. Citations need to change. It's too based on the old generation, so we need a lot more. With that, Danny?
Thanks, Dan. Can I trade places with you? Can I close that?
Okay.
I'm just going to put mine right on top. So I am the program director for science in a completely online university, and one of my jobs is to basically find ways to take content that is traditionally delivered in a very traditional face-to-face way, laboratory sciences, and put that into an online environment where you don't have that face-to-face interaction, which can be very challenging. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and that's where we are right here. So what is a laboratory in an online environment? Well, the first thing we know is what it's not. It's not this. We don't have physical spaces for laboratories. We don't have beakers. We don't have test tubes. We don't have chemicals. Not in the traditional sense. And you think about laboratories, everyone immediately goes to chemistry, but we've also got physics, biology, oceanography, meteorology, astronomy, geology. All of these courses have labs, and all of these disciplines utilize lab science as one of the most useful ways in which students learn. So we've got to find ways to deliver that content in new, unique fashions, and it follows on with a lot of the things that Dan was just talking about, because we can draw on some of these new technologies to really deliver this content in what can sometimes end up being a more effective and efficient way. So what is a lab in online education? Well, a lab in online education is the same thing as a lab in a face-to-face education. It's an opportunity for students to actually do science. Scientists don't only work in labs. Sure, some of our students may miss out on walking into a physical space, but they're doing a lot of the same things that scientists do. They're looking at data, they're following the scientific method. It's an opportunity for students to learn the techniques and the tools of science. A beaker is not the only tool that science uses. Inquiry-based activities. We really stress that students follow an inquiry-based process of learning in science that follows the scientific method. So what is the scientific method? Well, we've got the old-fashioned cookbook style here, where you start with observation, hypothesis, do some experiment, make an analysis, make an analysis of your data, and then draw some conclusions. But we really know, and what we're really emphasizing, is this now iterative nature of scientific inquiry that really doesn't end. So when we think about the ways that we design these lab experiences, this is the new scientific method that we have in mind that we're really focusing towards. So how do we do this in an online environment? Well, we use technology. So this is where some of Dan's work can play in. So if we jump into technology, we can think about a lab in an online environment as being in a couple of different categories. And not all of these are new. Hands-on labs. Well, this is pretty much your standard lab. I'll talk about each of these very briefly. CAN simulations, virtualizations, and then robotic labs. And these are increasing along this gradient of technology. So the hands-on lab up here might be the least associated with newer technology. And then some of the robotic labs down here have some of the most unique and some of the most complicated technology associated with them. And I'll give you brief examples of each of these. Now, if we jump over here to hands-on labs, we're an online environment. So this is a situation where we're actually shipping products to students for them to use. This is just an example of what you might consider like a kitchen chemistry set or a kitchen physics set. So students are actually getting things that they can manipulate. They have these chemistry sets that have very small amounts of relatively inert chemicals that students can mix in their kitchen and see the reactions and actually do that stuff in their kitchen. That doesn't work out for every single course that we have, but others it does. This is a picture that I took just yesterday. One of the courses that I teach is geology, and this is the lab kit that our students get for physical geology. So you can see we've got rock and mineral samples, we've got these tools, we've got a map, we've got all the things that students would use in a traditional hands-on geology lab, except they're doing it in a tent in Afghanistan or a submarine under the ocean. This is pretty traditional stuff. The next step up is what we would call CAN simulations or simply videos. The examples that I have here is from one of our chemistry courses. So this is an example of a reaction where you basically take a pickle and you plug it into an outlet. It's called the electric pickle. I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but the pickle basically starts to glow like a sodium light because you're charging the sodium ions inside the pickle. But it's a video. The students aren't seeing it in person. They're not seeing it in the real world. They're not doing it, of course, because it's hazardous. And we're not going to ship a pickle to everyone. But, every student is getting the same experience here. Another example where we use some of the things that we use in some of our physics courses is students watch a demonstration of an air track and they make the same measurements that you would make in a real world. Just about everybody has access to a stopwatch. You can time the car going down the air track, and these videos are designed so that you can do that. But every student is going to get the same data. Every student is going to have more or less the same experience because they're seeing the same thing. So there's limitations to this. The next step up is what I call virtualizations. Virtualizations might on the surface seem similar, but they're actually quite different because each student has the opportunity to get a unique result. Two that we have here, this is the solution we're moving towards for our chemistry courses, and this is what we're currently using for our biology courses. In the chemistry course, you do everything that you do in a traditional chemistry course. You walk into the lab, you put on your apron, you put on your goggles, you take the materials off the shelf, you determine the volumes, you determine the masses, you mix the things together, you see the reactions. But what's unique about this is that the reactions that you see are driven by the thermodynamic data for the chemicals that you've chosen. And these thermodynamic models are running in the background. So you can do things. You can really screw up. You can make explosions. You can produce chlorine gas. You can do all the stuff that you couldn't do in a traditional lab environment, or that would create a lot of problems. You can do experiments where you might otherwise be limited by cost, by safety, by disposal concerns. You can do all that in a virtual environment. And each student has the opportunity to see unique data based on the conditions in which the experiment's done. Same thing here for a biology lab. This is an example where we've got these plants. You can see some of them aren't so happy, some of them are happy. And what you're doing here is you're actually forcing environmental conditions on these plants, and we're speeding up time because we can do that in a virtual environment. We can do in a half an hour lab what you might have to do in 3 months in a traditional lab environment because we can just speed up the growth equations. Finally, one of the most interesting, although also possibly one of the most limiting, is the robotic labs. This is where students remotely control actual hands-on labs. There's obviously some costs, some scheduling, some logistical limitations here, but in terms of giving students the ability and the experience in actually having a lab and doing science with the actual instruments, these are pretty good solutions. So this is the student interface. This is what they're controlling. So the students are seeing an air car. It's got all these cameras. You can choose the camera view. You determine the mass of your air car. There's these robotic arms that take the car off the track and put it on the balance. You know, you're doing all the same stuff. You're just doing it remotely. Same down here for biology, a biology lab. You've got a microscope here, and that microscope is controlled remotely through this digital control box. And then the image is transmitted across the net to wherever you are, remotely. These sorts of things, obviously, really expensive to get set up, but there's a tremendous amount of potential here. Now, there's always limitations. In a chemistry program that's completely online, you're never going to have an instrumental techniques course. You're never going to have an analytical chemistry course. But there are some things that we can do better, that we can do more efficiently. We can really reach large numbers of general education students very effectively. And I think that we're actually doing a pretty good job of educating folks, giving them an inquiry-based experience in science, giving them scientific literacy, letting them understand how scientific data is generated, collected, how you separate that from pseudoscientific data. Our students are getting that experience, and it's convenient for them, it's affordable, it's effective, and they can get it just about anywhere they are. So, the last category of labs, and this is nothing new, but this is tremendous value in these labs, and this is what I would consider data-driven labs. There's a tremendous amount of data out there on the web. Not every scientist has to generate his or her own data. Just to have two examples here, I'm a hydrologist, so I tend to look at things related to water. This is just the stream gauge data for the Potomac River right out here in DC that I got yesterday. So you can download all of the water level data for the Potomac River for, this is actually one of the longest active gauges in the country, with continuous record for over 170 years, I think. And you can ask all kinds of questions about what's happening to water levels in the Potomac, what's controlling that. This is sea ice data. This is an interactive sea ice data graph. So you can choose all the different years, and you can look at the sea ice through time in all of these different years across the year, and see, is this year different than others? Have there been times when sea ice in the Arctic is lower? There's a tremendous amount of science that you can do just based on information that's already been collected, that you've already paid for as a citizen, that's out there for free on the web. And that's really powerful, and it's certainly something that's not unique to the online environment. That's all I had. That was the...
Whoa, were you fast?
Yeah, I'm fast. Are we done on time? I didn't want to cut into James' time.